We should maybe make a start. I hope everybody survived yesterday evening. I would like to thank the Latvian Presidency for a really fantastic night. I'm sure you agree with me that it was a great night. It was a shame they had to sing a Leonard Cohen song, but apart from that. This morning we are going to move from the industry perspective to this perspective more of regulators. But before I do that, I'd just like to make one very small announcement. You may have seen on the side of the room there, and indeed on the screens, also when you arrived at the airport yesterday, the day before yesterday, this morning, there's a small exhibition as well. One of the things that the Latvian Presidency has done as part of this conference is ask school children to do a painting about what they think drones might be and the future of drones and so forth. And we have 4 winners over there, and later on this morning we're going to be presenting a prize to the victorious painters. But that's what they are. That's what the things have been scrolling around on the screens for as well. Okay, all that said, we're going to paint a very different picture now because we're going to paint a picture of regulation. There'll be more words, I'm afraid, than colours. But we have a really interesting panel because it extends across from the parliamentary perspective, and we have a video from Jackie Foster, who is coordinating the Transport Committee's, or Transport and Tourism, or whatever it's called, it's very important obviously, committee's response to the communication. We have Patrick Key, who is the Executive Director of EASA, and we kept talking about EASA yesterday, so today we actually get to ask some real questions. I'm delighted to say we have Ingrid Cherfils as well, who is the DG of Civil Aviation in Sweden, Richard Thummel, who is the Deputy Director General of the DGCA in France, and of course our very own Margus Rahuoja, small but perfectly formed, who is of course the Head of Air Transport, as we know. So we're going to start with Jackie Foster. Anybody who knows her will of course not be surprised to see that this is a transmission from Jackie, and so let's start with that, if you'd be so kind. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Jacqueline Foster, Member of the European Parliament for the Conservative Party. My political group in the European Parliament is the ECR. I've been the Conservative transport spokesman for many years, off and on, and I took a particular interest when this report came forward and decided that I would like to be the rapporteur. My background is fairly interesting, as before I came to the Parliament in 1999, I had spent more than 20 years with British Airways. So as the transport spokesman, certainly for my party, I've been involved in a huge amount of legislation with regards to that sector over the years. This ranged from aviation security, aviation safety, Single European Sky, consumer issues, all of the operational issues over the years, etc., etc. And so with regards to RPAS, when this came forward as an initiative report, I thought it was quite important to take it, not least because this, in my view, is where aviation is going in the future. I've already started the process in the Parliament by holding a meeting just a couple of weeks ago with all of the key stakeholders. And the people I invited were key people who are expert in this area, ranging from the manufacturers to Eurocontrol, to National Air Traffic Services, to the Civil Aviation Authorities, and of course to EASA, the European Safety Agency. The good thing about meeting up with them, everybody was able to sort of touch base. A lot of people knew each other, but it was probably the first time they'd all been in the same room. And the key point to having this meeting was what they thought about the Commission communication, which was pretty positive, I would say, overall, and I actually agreed with them there. But also in their individual areas, what we would need to address and look at if we were to take this report forward to make sure it was a success. I think just some of the key issues, without going into great detail, that came forward were the following, and I agreed with this. What we don't need is prescriptive legislation. What we do need is to keep an international approach, and that was very important, the fact that we know that JARUS is a very successful committee, which is international, And there are very, very good key players who are already involved from many countries on trying to solve how we deal with the rise in the commercial success, clearly, of the RPAS. And so Eric Civil from EASA, who's the chairman of JARUS, was a great asset to actually sit on the committee, as I say, along with everybody else. So that was, in my view, very positive for me, and I had great feedback, and I think that will play an excellent part in the way we move this forward. So finally, I think that the key points that were raised, and I think the things that I thought about following discussions with the Commission about their communication were as follows. That A, I'm not looking for a prescriptive solution to this. I'm not looking for just a European solution to how we deal with this. What I'm looking at is being open-minded, how we deal with this at an international level, how we continue to deal with this at an international level, because it is international agreement that will solve some of the questions and some of the problems probably that we foresee. There are three areas, as we all know. The top end, where we've had the military sector, which is the real high-end sector of this, I think is covered generally by aviation legislation. The very bottom end, we call it the Amazon end. We've got the children in the park and they're playing with their little drones or playing with their little UAVs, and we certainly don't want to prevent them from doing that. But it's that huge section in the middle. And that's where we're needing to look, in my view, on a sort of case-by-case basis. There are fantastic things being done in this area, whether we're just wrecking railway lines, whether we're looking at power plants, where we're able to look at natural disasters where human beings cannot go in, and all sorts of things. And this is the huge growth area, and this is where we need to be able to see where we're moving forward on this. So they're the sort of challenges. I think your conference will, talk about these, discuss these. So I will, for my part, as the member of the European Parliament and rapporteur, continue to have some dialogue, certainly with the stakeholders and with anybody else who's interested. And I think together we will be able to come up with a very positive solution, I think a very positive report. I'm sure my colleagues in the Transport Committee and the Parliament will be very supportive, because we think there are great opportunities with this report. There are great opportunities for all of us who are here. And on that note, I hope you have a fantastic conference, and I look forward to seeing you soon. And by the way, I wish you all a most progressive and uplifting conference.
You've got to have a sight gag. You've got to have a sight gag. It's my pleasure now to welcome Mr. Patrick Key. He is, of course, known to almost all of us, I'm sure, formerly of the CESAR joint undertaking, but now the Executive Director of EASA. Patrick, if you'd be so kind.
Thank you, Andrew. Good morning to all. I'm not sure I'm known to everybody, because I'm going to share with you one of my experiences yesterday evening at the lovely reception organized by the Latvian Presidency. One of you, I'm not going to say who, approached me, a drone manufacturer, and asked me where I was from. I said EASA, and then I saw a horrified face in front of me telling me, please, we are making drones, it's not aircraft, so please, EASA, keep away from us, keep away from us. And at the same reception, a national authority, again, I'm not going to say who it was, came to me and said, look, drones are for national authorities, EASA has nothing to do with it, and please keep away from it as well. So I'm well, it might be personal, yes, I don't know, but I'm not feeling really welcome at this conference. And I just wanted to share with you maybe why I think we, EASA, need to be involved, and how we intend to do that. First of all, EASA was created to protect the European citizens from aviation risk. And also, this is less well known, but it's one of our duties to make sure that there is a level playing field for aviation. And in fact, when you look at the drones, protecting the EU citizens from aviation safety risk, the main difference between drones and traditional aircraft is that the main risk to the European citizens is not the risk for the passengers on board the aircraft, but it's the risk for third parties. And I still believe that it is in our role to protect the European citizens or the citizens in general from the risk of collision with a drone, be it for people who are on the ground or be it for people who are actually in an airplane. And on the second topic, I think it was also very clear yesterday in the workshop that I think all the speakers were asking for more Europe. And I don't think that any of the speakers was contemplating a purely national market. I don't know if the CEO of AirDog is with us today, but I'm not sure that he's looking at the Latvian market only for his products. So we need to create the conditions for the market, and we need to have at least a European common approach, a European level playing field, if not a world level playing field. And I think that is where we can add value, we as EASA, in support of the European Commission, of course. Now, let me just share with you briefly where we are in terms of thinking on what we should do for RPAS, for drones. I would just, again, agree with Jacqueline Foster on the fact that we are looking at three categories of drones or drones operations. The lower end, the middle end, not the middle end, the middle end and the higher end. In fact, the way we look at it is every time to look at the risk of all those activities. When you take the lower end, we call it the open category of drones. Basically, we are looking at small drones in general, which are operated by non-specialists, some of them being very reasonable, and some of them potentially being crazy. And the major difficulty in this category of drones will be to make sure that the risk that those operations are generating for the general public are at a manageable level, which is very low. So basically, we want to ensure that those drones are operated in an environment where when they fall, because they are operated by non-specialists, when they fall, they do not create any major damage. And that means that for this open category, our approach to it, we EASA, is to say, we do not want to regulate this. We just want maybe to enable enforcement. Because at the end of the day, for those drones, what is important is to make sure that the risk which is taken is still at a manageable level. So typically, we want to make sure that those drones are not flown in high-density populated areas. We want to make sure that those drones are not flown on stadiums or in parks where there are lots of people, unless they are duly authorized to do that. The way to do it is basically either to work on the machine or on the operator. Okay? And we believe that for this category of drones, it is up to the police forces to make sure that the no-fly zones are enforced. When you think about it, this means that the police forces need to be given the tools to do it. This means that they need to be able to identify the drones and the drone owners or the drone operators. They also need to be able to implement no-fly zones in order to make sure that the recommendations and the risk which is taken by the society at large is not too high. So basically for this category of drones, what we are looking at is no regulations. Maybe in each of the products which will be sold, a leaflet saying, you know, we want to say to you that first you are solely and entirely responsible for the damage that your drone is going to create. Secondly, that you know, there are a certain number of principles. You do not fly in the airports, you do not fly over dense areas, and so on and so forth. But this may not be sufficient in order to ensure that, for instance, drones are not flown over nuclear plants or over cities. And in order to make sure that this doesn't happen, what we are looking at is the possibility to implement software tools on those drones to restrict the flight envelope of those drones. Typically, a tool which would say this drone cannot fly above 500 feet, or a tool which would basically define no-fly zones in which those drones cannot fly. So this is what we would like to do for what we call the open category, which is the lower end of the market. Now, to come back to what Jackie was saying, you know, the complex story will be with the medium market and basically some of the applications that we saw yesterday, where basically what we would look at is, again, to have everything based on the risk assessment of the operations of these drones. And the risk assessment needs to be, in our view, validated by a national authority. And it will be up to the national authorities to make sure that an operator of such a drone has the means, the resources to make sure that the safety risk is managed. So in terms of risks, typically we could see that we would enable the possibility for those drones to be flown over a densely crowded area if there are sufficient provisions to make sure that the drone is airworthy, that it doesn't fall, or that if it falls, then there is, for instance, a parachute or something which makes sure that when it falls, it doesn't create any damage on the ground. And also, we would need to be given some reassurance on the level of capability of the drone operator. We may think about having a kind of driver license for drones. How do we need to go into that direction? This is something that we need to discuss with the stakeholders, but also with the national authorities. We may think about different categories of driver's license. This is something that we need to look at. But basically, in this big category of drones which are going to be used in dangerous areas or risky areas because there are people underneath, we need to make sure that those drones are operated by reasonable people who know how to fly those drones, and that the drones which are flown are drones which do not fall easily and that have a certain level of airworthiness. On the last category, which is the higher end category, I would tend to think that things are much easier because we would tend to consider those drones which are above, well, today we have a mass limit for that, but I'm not sure that the mass is the right indicator for that. But let's say it's more than 150 kilos. We would tend to consider those drones are regular aircraft that therefore need to be certified by us in order to make sure that they have the appropriate airworthiness, that need to be flown by somebody who has a license. Now, is it a pilot license? Is it a drone license? This is something, again, that we need to have a look at. And since all those drones, because I don't see today anybody flying those drones for the pleasure, since those drones are going to be used for commercial or professional applications mainly, we need to make sure, of course, that the operator of those drones will be given a certificate and an operator license. There was yesterday a mention about the problem of insertion of those drones into the airspace. It's certainly something that we need to have a look at. I know that in César, my friends, I don't know where Florian is, he's somewhere. César is looking at it. I'm not sure it's that complicated, honestly, because when you think about a higher-end drone, basically this drone will have on board all types of equipment which enable the controllers, the air traffic controllers, to consider this drone as any other aircraft, and therefore, the dialogue between the pilot and the controller is going to be the same. What is going to be a little bit more complicated would be in the uncontrolled airspace, where there will be a need for cohabitation of all types of air vehicles, be it gliders, ultralight aircraft, balloons, and drones, where I think we need to be cautious. Maybe, again, the right way to approach it is to say, okay, for the lower end category, you just don't fly in those zones, so you fly below 500 feet, and that should clear the skies for the rest of the aviation industry. Or you are, for the middle category, you are able to fly under a certain number of conditions. Those conditions being, for instance, to inform air traffic control or to make sure that you are outside of the paths of the other users of the airspace. So I think this needs to be looked at. Yes, one of the things that I think is really worth consideration in terms of technologies for the higher end zone, for the higher end drones and their operations in controlled airspace is the concept of operations. We made studies in EASA on military drones only, which show that I think it's about 75% of the accidents which are not related to operations in training of drones are due to a loss of communication between the drone and the ground. Okay? And when there is a loss of communication, then the concept of operations of the different drones vary. We heard the person from AirDog yesterday telling us that when there is a loss of communication, the drone is programmed to go back to the base. We can't afford to do that with a drone which is flying at an altitude of 100,000 feet, for instance, because then the return back to the base may very well cross the approach path at London Heathrow or Paris Charles de Gaulle. So that's typically an area where in César, I think you are going to look at it. This is the only area on which we need to find a solution. But for the rest, I'm very optimistic about how to deal with it. So I think we in EASA are prepared to accompany this great market. We take the drones, the RPAS, as a completely new type of aircraft for which we are given an opportunity to write new legislation, new regulations, which have to be the 21st century regulations for aviation. And that means that we need to be a light touch, we need to be proportionate, we need to be as close to the market as possible, but still making sure that the citizens' lives are protected in the right manner. And I think it's an opportunity that we, all of us, should not miss to really build for this new domain a legislative framework which helps the market to be alive and also helps this fantastic opportunity to become a great reality in the next 5 to 10 years. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Patrick. That was very helpful. I'd now like to ask Ingrid Cherfils, who is the Director General of Civil Aviation in Sweden, to talk to us, if you'd be so kind. Thank you.
I should fly. Okay. It should fly. What do I press?
There should be a presentation.
I have a presentation. Can we have it on the screen? Hopefully. No? Okay, but I can start by thanking the Commission and the Latvian Presidency for arranging for this conference on this very important topic. Yes, what do I press? Oh, okay, thank you. Good. It was easy. Thank you. So thank you very much for arranging for this conference and giving me the opportunity to share our experience of RPAS in Sweden. I will not dwell in details of the role of the Swedish Transport Agency as such, but I think we have to realize that this is a very technical-driven industry, and the world is changing very fast, and we have to adapt to this changing environment and keep up with the technical development. And the role of the regulator, the Swedish Transport Agency, is to monitor the technical development and gradually adjust and adapt rules and regulations when necessary to facilitate the safe and secure development of technical innovation. So I will now go into how we have worked on this and how our rules have been created to adjust to the RPAS development. We had quite an extensive consultation with stakeholders, and the rules in Sweden were published in the autumn of 2009 and entered into force on 1st of December 2009. So we have had national regulations now for 5 years. We have during this time only made slight amendments to these regulations because I think it's time now to have more of an international European approach to these rules. The rules in Sweden apply to RPAS that are used or designed for commercial purposes, professional use, for example, aerial work, testing and research, but also for unmanned flight beyond visual line of sight. That means that RPAS used for recreational purposes within the visual line of sight, the rules do not apply. But that doesn't mean that there are not any rules that do apply. They still have to apply the general rules that apply to all operations regarding, for example, the rules of the air. So what we have done, we have divided it in 4 categories. And for all these categories, you need an approval from the Civil Aviation Authority, and you need as well an insurance according to the EC Regulation 785 from 2004. We can see that the 2 categories depend on the maximum takeoff weight and the kinetic energy that the RPAS can develop, and if they are flying within or without a line of sight. Category 1A and 1B, the approval is valid for 2 years. Category 2, it's valid for 1 year. In Category 2, you have to have also a skill test for pilots, and the requirements are higher than the other categories. In Category 3, it's a higher requirements you can have. You have to have the equivalent as a commercial pilot license and other requirements as well. Some figures as we have today. We have almost issued 450 approvals as of today. And we still see an increase in the number of applications and approvals all the time. There is a different process for the approvals. For Category 1A and 1B, we have a very simplified process. It's almost a self-declaration. For Category 2, you have to have, as I mentioned before, a skill test for pilot. That is, you have to have a practical examination. And currently, we have approved 20 pilots. But these are the numbers of approvals that we have today. But how many perform operations with the RPAS that do not have any approval? That we don't know. And that's the difficult issue for us that we will have to discuss. As an authority, we cannot be everywhere, but we try to monitor in the media, in YouTube, in Facebook, on operations, because these people like to show what they are doing, and then we can get them and tell them that they need an approval, or we can go to court. We have done that in several occasions. But that is one of the challenges we are faced with. So why do we have RPAS and a high degree of approval in Sweden? I think the main activities that we have had in Sweden is the aerial photography and filming, and that is because the real estate agencies like to show pictures of the houses they want to sell from filming or from the sky. So it has been a very high development of this filming in Sweden. Well, it's also used for aerial work, for forest inventory, for inspections, for advertising, but also for research and development. And we have several restricted areas in Sweden where you can test beyond the visual line of sight flying. That has been performed in Sweden on several occasions. Our experience having regulations for almost 5 years, that at the beginning there was clearly a demand for having a regulatory framework for the use of RPAS. And for us, the rules have been an enabler. It has enabled the market to set off, and it is still expanding. We also see a great interest in the RPAS and the use of RPAS. And it has been greater than anticipated in Sweden. As we heard yesterday, the business opportunities are huge, and there is no limit, to say the least. This segment is very much characterized by a high amount of entrepreneurship. We also can see some similarities with the concept of remote tower that we have in Sweden. We have, as of today, one air traffic control tower that is currently being operated remotely in Sweden. And here we have some similarities because the similarities relies on how you can rely on new technology and fitting it into the existing regulatory framework on the basis of a safety assessment, where the provider must show to the regulator that the technology is safe and fit for purpose. We have also seen in Sweden increased use of multicopters for recreational use. I think in many other countries that's the biggest increase that we see for now, because the price is very cheap to buy one. But it's also a challenge for us to follow this development as well. We have not had any accident reported to us yet, as we know of. We have very few reports on incidents from the operators themselves. We receive some reports from the air traffic controllers where there are RPAS that are flying in a controlled zone. We've had a serious incident at the city airport of Bromma, where they had to close the airport for 1 hour because we had a drone flying in the controlled zone. So there is quite an increased complaint and annoyance with this RPAS in certain instances. And there is a beginning conflict between the air traffic controllers and the drones flying in certain areas. We have also received complaints from helicopters performing aerial work in low altitude. So we're beginning to have more and more complaints, also from the public, not much more on safety issues as such, but much more on privacy issue, integrity issues, but also on noise. We are also faced with some uncertainties concerning the application of laws regarding camera surveillance. And we have two court cases pending in Sweden where they are trying to interpret the current law on the camera surveillance in Sweden. So it's some kind of a legal uncertainties that we have to address. The challenges, there are many challenges that we have heard this morning, but also yesterday. I think one of the challenges is to create harmonized rules in Europe and worldwide in order to enable the market to grow further and to have a level playing field. We have to have a detect and avoid system in order to allow flight beyond visual line of sight in non-segregated airspace. I think the technology is coming, it's a matter of time. A big challenge is to reach the operators, because the operators are not per se in the aviation community. It's a total different people we have to reach, and we have to find new ways to reach the operators. We also have to reach the public so that are aware of this new technology, technical development and how they can address it, where they can file complaints, where they can get the information. We have to reach the retailers, the manufacturers, as we mentioned yesterday. Patrick mentioned the enforcement problems. We as civil aviation authorities are not always fit for purpose to address all these issues. We have to cooperate with the police authorities and other authorities. We also have to address the cross-border operations, because there are likely in the future, we see it in Sweden, that there are some requirements to operate in other countries. How do we address that? So I think the challenge for us is that we also have to bear in mind that the regulation takes time, but technology evolves rapidly. And for us, it's a challenge to keep up with technology and not to be prescriptive, as was mentioned earlier today. So lessons learned. I think for regulators to develop rules, you have to have several competencies, not only in airworthiness operations, but also air navigation, security, and you have to have lawyers involved in this as well. Another lessons learned is that information is a key factor. You have to have a broad information communications with many stakeholders and the public as well. But also finally, you have to find a balance between enabling the market to grow and enable the industry to find their own solutions to how to reach the safety objectives and to meet the requirements that are in place. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm always delighted to hear that we need more lawyers. I think that's really great. It's going to be a lawyer-led recovery here in Europe. However, before that, we'll have another regulator, which is to say Richard Thummel, who is the Deputy Director General of the DGCA in France. Richard, thank you.
Thank you, Andrew. Dear ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I'm not the Deputy... Thank you. I'm Deputy Director of the French National Supervisory Authority, and Patrick Gandil regrets, General Director regrets not to be with us today. He has caught a flu, and unfortunately it's in circumstances where RPAS technology is still of little help, so he couldn't be with us today. I'm glad to share with you our experience in rulemaking process and regulations as far as RPAS is concerned in France. So I have 4 choices, now of this one. You have no idea either. Ingrid. The white? This one? Normally it should work. So
we can't operate a remote control.
as Ingrid said, we are in a very technical industry, but so nevertheless, I shall begin. In France, we introduced the 2 RPAS regulation in April 2012. The first one dealing with the use of the airspace, the other one with airworthiness, operations, and pilot competencies. The regulation really helped the market to rise. It, of course, didn't create the market, but figures which I would have liked to show to you clearly demonstrate that these regulations were enablers for this strong increase. 1 year after their introduction, we had roughly 250 operators declared. Today, we have almost 1,300 operators, and each month there are 60 more operators which are declared. This sector is so a very dynamic sector which creates jobs, not plenty of jobs, but it's still very important, 3,000 jobs over the past 2 years. It's a sector which is mainly composed of very small enterprises or small and medium enterprises. So when we look at the activities, the main part of the activity is photography and video, as in Sweden. I didn't have real estate needs as a canonical example. My canonical example is more wedding photography, but it doesn't make much difference. But there are also manufacturers, for manufacturers who are offering fully self-designed products. And it's a sector which strong innovation, strong part of innovation. And I would also like to add that it's a sector which, it's a new branch of industry, more than a new branch of aviation sector of aviation industry. The RPAS is an aircraft, but it is not central for the operator. It's a work tool, and besides in this work tool, what is very important is the sensor more than the aircraft itself. Thanks a lot. So here you can see a graph with the figures that I just mentioned. So we are facing with other kind of companies than the one we used to know before. RPAS is considered as one of the industrial sector with an important potential of growth, and therefore it is part of a plan of industry growth in France, and we created a national council for RPAS industry, civil RPAS, to put together in the same rooms all the actors which are concerned, regulators, industry, SMEs, and major companies, but also major contractors who plays an important role. Among them, we have the railway companies, the energy companies, who are probably those who may bring additional growth, provided that regulatory and technical barriers are overcome. And this is, in a certain way, the job of the technical committee which are working for this council. So concerning the regulation we developed, of course, the first aim is to ensure safety. As Patrick mentioned, it is not safety for passengers, and this is an important change of paradigm. Is the safety of third parties on the ground and of other aircraft. But from the beginning, the need to have regulation that allow the development of the industry was also one of our objectives. And the principles that we used to develop that regulation were to well, in a certain way, we try to have an innovative approach to regulation for an innovative sector. So in a certain way, we start with a blank page. We had a strong relation with stakeholders, and our regulations could be described as a risk-based regulation. The fact that we are dealing with an industry of services and this risk-based approach led us to think not in terms of categories of vehicles, but in terms of usage scenarios. And the regulations is built with these scenarios. It's also an open approach, meaning that regulations includes provisions to grant exemptions when we are outside the frame of the foreseen situation. So on a case-by-case basis, we can allow approval and exemptions. And so we deal with three kind of users. Recreation users, so RPAS are clearly, from a regulatory point of view, model aircraft. There is no different regulations for what is the same regulatory principle, even though the uses are very different. We spoke about that yesterday. And we have, for professional purpose, 4 different usage scenarios. 2 of them are VLOS, 2 of them are beyond VLOS. And as far as the VLOS scenarios are concerned, the first one deals with operations in unpopulated area, while the second one deals with operations in cities. And in that case, approvals from the prefecture, the local government authorities, are needed. BVLOS is very interesting because it's a kind of breakthrough. At least it's a step that allows a future breakthrough. Here we have also 2 kind of scenario. One was operator can fly inside a 1 kilometer radius with RPAS till 25 kilo, provided that he ensure means to prevent people from entering the area where it operates, or to manage the risks, this kind of risks. It is a scenario which is suited for precision agriculture, for example, for topographical measurements of quarries. The last scenario is there is no limitation in range. And we introduced was a strong limitation in weight, which is one of the main features that mitigate risks to third parties, in that case to other aircrafts. And this limitation is 2 kilo. The other features that mitigate risks is that for each operation or each set of operations which are similar, the operator must get an approval, and on the basis of a kind of risk analysis. So there are very few operators which use this scenario, only 5, as far as I know, are concerned in France. And one of its usage is to prepare what is not yet authorized, what we could call scenario 4+, and what would answer the needs of people who want to inspect and monitor networks. Because obviously 2 kilo is not enough to have enough energy and enough payload to monitor on an industrial basis network. For example, SNCF has a specific problem to deal with surveillance of people who are stealing copper cables. And here we have a contractor which is very interested in pushing forward this frontier. A few words about security risks, which is the talk of the month in France. Obviously, there are two different aspects, two different risks which we are facing. The one is the fact that the credibility of the state may be harmed when uneducated people or people who like to breach the rules with no real harmful intentions fly over cities. And the other one is the risk of unlawful actions, of the dangerous unlawful actions. And this risk is, at least for the future, maybe not for today, an issue that we have to cope with. But the answer for these two risks are not the same. It is obvious that when we are speaking about identification of RPAS, we are not at all dealing with the second risk I mentioned. So these unauthorized flights put an important workload on a lot of government services those days. I just wanted to stress out that as far as solutions concerning devices on board and technology are involved, it is also important in this field to involve the industry, to involve it upstream, and to involve not only major companies but also SMEs. As far as the recreational usage of drones are concerned, we produced last year a leaflet. Its form is directly inspired from the Ten Commandments, as you can see. Unfortunately, we produced it in the end of November, so it was too late to enforce all sellers to put it in the package with their drones, but this is something that will be done later. And when we are looking to what is said in the forums on the web, it's information about regulation which is very appreciated by most of the responsible actors in the field of recreational usage of drone. So to finish, we share the view that there is a need for regulatory action at the EU level. And based on the lessons learned of what we have done, we consider that it is important to take into account what already exists in countries where there is a regulation and where there is an important industry activity. And it's important at least to avoid backward steps. The risk-based approach and the proportionate approach is obviously the right way to deal with this issue through a simple and flexible approach. And I really wanted to say again, or at least to underline, that RPAS industry do not obey to the same principle as classical aviation industry, and for that reason, the regulatory answers that we have for aviations are not necessarily suited to RPAS. To take an example, it's not obvious that scheme existing for pilot competency should be just taken, simplified, or adapted. And in certain circumstances, we may have to start with a blank page and or at least to to take into account the specificity of this activity. And we consider that not all operations are in the frame of an international market. As you notice, we have a lot of very, very small operators which are operating in a local market. So it is important to identify what are the priorities and what are the challenges that regulation at the EU level may help to deal with. Thank you.
Thanks very much, and I'm quite impressed by the concept of the 10 Commandments as the way to go forward, because as God said to Moses, just keep taking those tablets. Our final speaker this morning, last but by no means least, is Margus Rahuoja, who is the head of air transport within DG Move. Previously, of course, with Commissioner Callas's cabinet as well. Margus, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew. I would actually entertain you if you wish. I would like to see, before I start, what do we talk about? So what kind of people we have here? I would like to see where is the industry. I saw the cars somewhere. Stand up. Stand up. Just move a bit. Thank you. There we are. So there's the industry. Thank you. Where is the insurer? Who are the insurers? Who make the money? You are the insurer. Stand up. One. Where are the regulators? Regulators, stand up. Move. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, wait. We're talking about you now. So, who are the others? Sit down. Everybody else stand up. Who are you? So, who are you? Speak up. Operators. Who are you? Operators. Okay. Where is the media? Please sit down. Can I see the media, please? Oh, there we go. Again, insurer and the media. So there we go. So I'm going to entertain you. Why? Because we are going to show you how the airspace is going to change. Why? We talk about the automation of the aviation technologies because we are in the Middle Ages. We are in the Middle Ages. And now I'm going to read my speech. So I have 4 pictures to you. So if you see the 4th picture is the end. Okay, we talked about the next steps in the automation of the aviation technologies. That next step takes us to the many new forms. That is what we have heard yesterday from the industry voices. That's why I asked them to stand up first. That is what Ingrid, over there, who is the chairman of the ECAC, just explained about the remote tower, and Richard mentioned that the market is eager to take off. I think that Europe needs to be ambitious and embrace the drones as an essential part of the future of flying. Drones create opportunities and allow for more types of operations and services, expanding to many other sectors, from farming and media, we saw that, over infrastructure and transport to energy and telecoms and many others. Aviation activities become integrated in other sectors of activities. That makes it difficult to assess the size of the drone market. In any case, we need to create the right environment from them to flourish. All European businesses are entitled to make the best use of the drone technologies to help them expand and remain competitive. That is our bottom line. We want to see jobs and growth in Europe. The key to open up the drone market is safety. On this, I would like to complete the presentation of my colleagues with some observations. Let me see how many I do have. I have 4. Drone operations are a global business. That is why we have to overcome the fragmentation of drone rules and go for European harmonization over there. Second point, European rules should be not mean or heavy or bad. Industry yesterday called for proportionate rules. We know that. We work on that. And Patrick just showed the way how to keep rules proportionate to the risk, to the operations. Beyond the pillar approach, we will need to think about other pieces of legislation. How can we qualify the risk of open, specific, or certified operations? We will have to refine the existing risk of classification scheme. We can work on the basis of existing scheme in the incident reporting regulation, and we need and we will have to make sure that drone incidents are well reported. We need to have reports. Today we don't have them. Finally, we have to think about the rules of the air. What rules would drone operations require? The integration of drones into the European airspace requires them to adapt to the existing rules and requirements. But what about very low level of operations, operations lower than 500 feet? There are no rules for this airspace segment. So we still have to work on the operation of the environment. What from will these rules take? We have to think of layers of rules, and I have 3. The starting point is EASA basic regulation. The principles on drone regulation should be included in EASA basic regulation. We are going to change 261 to 16 actually, not 261 as well, but that's another thing. Sorry, that was my Freudian slip. But 216. And we are conducting a very big impact assessment, and we would like to see how the drones should be included into that. The second layer are the implementing rules. EASA will develop them. The Commission will adopt them. So the implementing rules will have the substance to the rules. That is why JAROS is so important and needs to be and delivering on time. Europe wants to work in all transparency, and that is very different from the rest of the world. We always work in transparency. That implies that JAROS must deliver in time. That will be the challenge, and we need all experts on board to build on the existing expertise. And the third layer, we need to develop industry standards. I think we discussed it yesterday. I saw the industry here, and everybody wants to have the standards. Speaking about the technologies is raising the issue of the appropriate level of funding in the CESAR program. And we have, of course, Florian over there. We promised in the Commission communication last year that we would integrate drones into the ATM master plan. We have kept our promise. We promised and we know that the R&D efforts are required. Now it is a matter of investing in the work packages to see the missing drone technologies developed. That is what I wanted to say about the common rules. We also need to think about the implementation, where the national authorities should continue to play an important role. Because without national authorities, there's no need for Europe. It's very simple. National administrations need to continue important tasks, and we need to be careful that it remains manageable, even if the number of the drone operations grow very large. We would like to alleviate the task of national administration by designing the rules and oversight in a clever way. For example, in a number of cases, the operators should be able to carry out the risk assessment themselves, develop the necessary risk mitigation, and self-declare compliance. I think this is the way forward. We, as regulators, we cannot make it all. It has to be at the operator side. Otherwise, the authorities will drown in the paperwork. Also, the idea to keep the rules very light for the low-risk category of drones should help alleviate the administrative burden. The oversight will basically be limited to the ensuring that the operational restrictions imposed on the light category are respected, not flying in high-risk restricted airspace, and maybe creating an EC label for drones, for example. Voila. That was the scene setter from the perspective of the European Commission. On a last word on the timing, we work toward delivering this structure of rules from 2016, I think. Yeah. That was the date set by the European leaders to integrate in a stepwise way drones into the airspace. It is not a question of what comes first, small, large, simple, complex, low risk, high risk. We have to kind of we have to start to work on all of these. They all have the legitimate expectation, and we heard yesterday very much about that. So I think we as regulators, we need to think very carefully. And I would like to hear from you what we as European regulators should not regulate. We will regulate the fundamental rights, we will regulate the kind of the issues linked to the privacy and so on and so forth. Patrick will regulate the airworthiness. But the question is, what should we not regulate? And I think yesterday we heard a lot about it. Oh, I didn't show you the pictures. Sorry about that. Let me see. There you are. This is the future. Thank you.
I always love a speech when the person giving it can't wait to hear what he's going to say. Thank you. That was very helpful, Margus, very helpful. For a minute there, I thought we were going to have a certain amount more. Conflict is too strong a word. I have a horrible feeling that we've got a panel here that's in screaming agreement, which is going to be quite difficult to keep entertaining and interesting. But for a minute, I thought we had a difference because I thought the Swedish regulations were entirely weight-based and the French regulations were much more functionally assessed. But then when it actually came down to writing the rules, it turned out that the French rules were also weight-based as well. Is that where we're going? Is that the inevitable course that we're going to have to, and in both cases I think it was weight and energy potential, wasn't it? Kinetic energy that we're trying to regulate. Patrick, do you think that's the right way to start? I'll start with you because the microphone's at your end. Is that the right way to do it? Is weight the correct answer? It is on, I believe. It should be. Is it on now? Try now. Yeah. Can we talk a little loud? Can you just talk loudly? I saw the guy turn it on. We can't work remotes and we can't work microphones, but we are able to regulate drones. Don't you worry about that. It's an altogether different issue. Just checking you're awake.
Yes, I guess you can hear now. So, what was the question again?
I wish I could remember.
No, I'm kidding.
Is weight the right basis for regulation?
Weight is certainly one way to discriminate between the different risks, because it's kind of common sense that if a drone of 500 grams drops on your car or on your head, it's less dangerous than 150 kilos. That's kind of obvious. But I don't think it's the only factor, and that's what complicates the things. Because one very small drone of 2 kilograms flying at a very high altitude and going into the engine of an aircraft can be extremely dangerous, whereas a very heavy drone, which is still within line of sight, that you use for the crops, for fertilizers and things like that, then it's at a low altitude and it's very, very low risk when you think about it. So that's why when we talk about those categories, we talk about the risk. We do not really talk about the weight. Weight is one factor of risk, but it's not the only one.
Okay. Margus, you want to...
Thank you. Can I have my third slide, please? Because it will actually illustrate what Patrick just said. Thank you. No drones. So there we are. You are all professionals. I'm just, talking here. But if you look at the airspace today, that's the way it is. And can you put the next slide, please? That's the way we see it tomorrow. So, of course, we have extremely high altitude, drones doing some stuff there. We don't want to know even what they do. And then and the next one is like about 4,000 meters cargo. And the rest of them are about, let's say, 150 meters and below. And there we're talking about 10,000 sold last year, 100,000 in the market, 100,000. So that's what we're talking about. So that's why, of course, the FAA had the rulemaking and forbade everything. Any Americans in here? No. So, yes?
Couple.
So maybe we want to have a comment from the FAA. So why they chose the way they chose? Because I think this is the future. Like we had Edgar's. Edgar's is somewhere there. I saw him. So I think even if the regulators, focus on this, 20,000 feet, 11,000 meters, 4,000 meters, life is in the 150 meters. So that's just, that's the challenge. Thank you.
Right. Does anyone from America want to take on the mantle of representing the FAA? No, I don't blame you for a moment. Any other suckers? People prepared to stand? No, you threw out the gauntlet, but no one was prepared to pick it up. Ingrid, what do you think? We're talking about risk. Patrick and indeed that very helpful slide that's now gone looked at various functionalities. Is risk? How do we do risk? How do we regulate the risk?
No, but I fully agree with what Patrick has said. I think if we look at the long run, and we have discussed it in EASA for other regulations, that we should move more towards a performance-based and risk-based regulation and oversight. So that is, I fully agree. We have weight as a category in Sweden because in 2009 we didn't have much experience and much to rely on. But I think we have to move towards more risk-based. And I think it was Margus that mentioned that the operators should show us how they intend to operate, whether drones or other aircraft, safe and secure for the public as such. It's the operators' responsibility to show it to us as regulators. We cannot do it as regulators because the operators have the knowledge and the experience. But we have to assess it in some way.
Which makes the sort of dialogue with the operators very important, doesn't it? Which I thought one of the very interesting, amongst the many interesting things in Richard's presentation was the National RPAS Committee, which was set up to exactly do that, I presume. Do you want to speak? Could you explain a little bit more about the committee, Richard, to us, do you think? Richard, sorry.
Well, it has just been created. At least the technical committee have held their first meeting in February, so it's very young. But the idea is really to identify what are the barriers and how is it possible to overcome them, and the fact that we discuss with contractors, operators, manufacturers, and regulators means that the answer will be not only on the regulatory side. Obviously, industry standards is an issue. I consider that the word regulatory barrier is not very adequate because it's often a mix of regulatory issues, technological issues, and way of operating. So I cannot tell much more about what will be the outcomes of this work that just began.
It's not normal. That's the whole purpose of committees, is to validate what you've already decided, isn't it? I've given the secret away. Sorry, shouldn't have done that. Another thing,
in that case, no.
Another thing that I thought quite interesting is all this apparently missing technology. We're still missing the technology. We're going to need to rely on the SJU, on JARAS and whatever. What is the technology we're missing? I don't understand. What technology are we missing? Anyone? Patrick? He's obviously waving his arm.
I think it's too easy to say that we are missing the technology. There was a presentation from ASD yesterday saying, there is a need to invest money in research and development, there is a need to do more, and so on and so forth. And I'm a great believer in the learning by doing. And it's quite striking to see that there are only 2 manufacturers who applied for the certification of a drone to EASA. I'm talking about the big ones. Only 2. So, and technology is not really the issue, because drones have been operated in the military sector all around the world. We have safety records. They are not public. We don't know them. We have a part of it. Technology is not really the issue for flying those drones. What we are missing is an operational concept, a way to operate those drones in a safe manner, in a non-military environment. And those are not really technological issues. We need to agree on, how to safely operate those drones. Now, where I think we will need technology is on the enforcement, on the recreational part of the field. If we, when I say we, it's the authorities in general, need to identify the drones, then we will need to put a piece of equipment on board those aircraft. It's not rocket science. It's existing. We just need to pick the right technology, and we need to make sure that it's a choice which is a worldwide choice. We don't want to have, a Swedish choice independent from the French, independent from the Danish, and so on and so forth. So that's going to be the tricky part. But the technology is there. If we want to have no-fly zones, again, most of the drones which are going to be manufactured in the future are going to be manufactured in China. Let's face it. Okay, and this is why this notion that Margus explained of a EC label is a good notion. It's like with toys. If you want to import one of those drones in Europe, it has to respect a certain level of safety requirements. It has to possibly have something in the drone which makes sure that you can prohibit it from flying, over nuclear plants or things like that. Technology is not the issue. It's the standards which are going to be the issue.
So what's going to be the process? I presume it's EASA that will develop those standards. Is that a fair no?
Well, I think that for the kinds of standards that we are talking about, it's mostly, purely sense and efficacy, like for the toys, really. So it's not us. It's not. That's where I would agree with the person I mentioned of yesterday, who told me EASA has nothing to do with what we do. Yes, for those kinds of standards, I don't think it's an aviation standard. I think it's an industry standard.
Okay, but so if it's not EASA, who is it, Margus? Who's going to develop the toy standard?
Ingrid.
Ingrid is.
Okay.
Known in the trade as the flaming handball.
Well, the initiative, the way I see European rules is that if it goes cross-border, if you want to sell your product or your application or something cross-border, there has to be European regulation.
By which you mean across a European border?
Yeah, across European. So Sweden, Denmark, Sweden, Finland, Sweden, what else? Estonia,
Latvia,
for instance.
Estonia.
Latvia going across the sea. So there I see European regulation. But if it's not crossing the border, why should we have European regulation? If you don't want to sell across the border, who cares, right? So that's the way I see it.
I think I care, actually. I think I quite like the analogy with the toys, and that this is a safety level.
Of course, what we need is, and I also like Edgar's point yesterday, what we need is, we need to make sure that what is sold is actually conforming what we want. So it's not about regulators saying, you cannot have that toy, you cannot have that toy. What is on the market is already, let's say, conform. And it's really a good idea. Well, the other question is whether this software or hardware or whatever it is has to be, let's say, updated every month or every year or every day or every second. That's another thing. Because if you look at your smartphone, it actually upgrades itself all the time if you allow it. So there are plenty of opportunities, but I would say, yes, let's say the user is irresponsible and the user doesn't care. This is what my driver's teacher, when I was learning to drive the car, said, every other driver is a killer. That's what he said. You know, you are okay, but every other one is a killer. So make sure that you actually get to the point B and are alive. I think that's the philosophy.
And in those days, they were driving trabbies as well, so it was even worse. But you haven't answered my question, Margus, so if you wouldn't mind. No, all those years in politics have not been wasted. Who should be making the rules, the standards? I mean, Patrick's saying, no, they are societal rules almost. Not quite, but nearly. But where in this room full of regulators, who is actually the person who's going to make the EC standard stamp? Where's it going to happen?
Standardization bodies.
You think you're okay, and Etsy and
Sense or you know, what is the standardization body for the toys? I don't know if there is somebody from DG Enterprise, so maybe you can help us there.
The gentleman here, yes, in the model aeroplane field, what's the story? Everyone has this need to switch the button.
On already. I wasn't thinking about toys or model aircraft. I'm thinking in the aviation field, particularly in light aviation, there is ASTM, which is a global standards generating body. It's a peer review mechanism from the experts in a particular sector, and they deal with all sorts of products. It's a global organisation. That's just one example.
Have they got a mandate? Have they got a mandate in the drones area? Do you know?
Not that I'm aware of, but I don't know.
They do. I think they do. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, sir. Eric has the answer. Fantastic. Yeah.
Haven't touched the button yet. Yeah, there are lots of standardization bodies that develop industry standards, and ASTM is developing standards for UAVs because it's American at the basis. But so you have.
I think you can touch the button now.
You have in Europe you have Eurocade who's working on larger RPAS and smaller RPAS. You have RTCA in the United States. You have SAE. You have Senelec, Etsy, who can work on it. You also have standards developed for toys by Sen. So you have quite a few standardization bodies already doing it. It's a common practice.
Is anyone going to standardise all these standardisation bodies, just out of interest?
That's anybody from DG Enterprise?
DG Enterprise? Are we going to standardise?
DG Grow.
Yes, DG Grow, please. Yes, I thought that was agriculture when I first heard about it. But, oh, Denmark. Sorry, Jasper, down here. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Jesper Rasmussen, Danish TAA. I will touch upon the standardization later, but I mean, we're talking about products, consumer products here. And we have, and the Commission has a strategy for standardization of the consumer products. And I think you should distinguish between the voluntary standards done by industry themselves, there's a lot going on, and mandated standards, which are actually demanded by the Commission typically. And I think it's very important task for the Commission, together with EASA, which kind of standards are needed, and who is going to implement them or to make them. Is it the Senelec? Is it the Eurocade? Something has to do on the ISO level and global level. IEC, there are many bodies here. I think it's very important that the Commission and DG Enterprise, DG Move, is working together on this. Thank you.
Thank you. So you, like me, think there is a role for the Commission, and Margus, you're not allowed to just say, you know, not my department, thanks very much. You know, there's a joke here about Pontius Pilate and aviation, but I won't make it yet. DG Grow, please. And then I saw you, Jim.
Just to complement the intervention, fully agree on that. RPAS is flying, but RPAS is a machine. So what we say, there is a directive on machines. That directive does not apply if there are specific rules. So if there are aviation rules, directive does not apply. But if it's not, so if EASA is not involved, as Patrick said, then we have usual way of doing that. That is a directive, and products have to be compliant based on standards developed in the industry. That's the way we see it in DG Growth.
Can you be more clear on flying toys?
Well, toys. There is a regulation on toys, but that's specific. The regulation on toys is for protecting kids from being hurt when they use RPAS. It's really different from the machinery directive that says a machine has to be safe itself when it's sold to the general public and not only to kids.
Okay, so you saw yesterday what you can do with toys. They can fly away, they can fly up.
Can I ask the third slide that I had, please? Because I can explain what we think. And there we are, one commission. No question. So if you look at that slide, do you think, or anyone who thinks this slide is wrong, please stand up. Okay, so we have a comment. Please give a mic.
Give the microphone to that man.
And please explain in what sense this slide is actually not correct.
So
thank you for standing up, of course.
You forgot to identify when you identified the groups here, and that's the legitimate airspace users. So I'm Thomas Mildenberger, I'm representing the European Cockpit Association, and
the pilots.
The legitimate airspace users, as opposed to drones which are illegitimate airspace users.
I brought my president and my technical director with me, so they listened very carefully. And you said there are no rules below 500 feet. That's plainly wrong. There is a lot of rules below 500 feet. And also what Patrick said, this 500 feet border where you assume there is no traffic below, that's also wrong. There's a lot of manned aviation below 500 feet. We have all those crop dusters, we have air work, we have police, we have emergency helicopters flying there regularly, and they are flying outside of airfields, outside of controlled airspace regularly. And if you now try to push away the responsibility for these toys, if they are going in that airspace, they are a threat to manned aviation. And so far, I completely agree to what Peter said. They mix with us, they mix with manned aviation. So you have to take responsibility here and make and protect the manned aviation which is in this airspace legitimately. We have initiatives, national initiatives, and also European initiatives to deal with this issue. However, I did not hear yesterday and I did not hear today that you also consider the threat of those drones for manned aviation.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, leaving aside for a moment, you believe you are a legitimate airspace user and the drones are illegitimate airspace users. I mean, I'm just guessing, maybe you're a pilot.
We are regulated already and the drones try to be regulated.
I'm just guessing, maybe you're a pilot. But the point is good. The point is good. What, Patrick, Margus, you've got the microphone.
First of all, if of course we acknowledge that obviously there are points of contact with manned aviation, and there will be, always, because there will always be manned aviation, one way or the other, either recreational or commercial, of course, because that's a choice. And I don't think that the whole of the airspace, like we see it on this slide, will be only unmanned. That is not logical. So the question is, what I was trying to say is that today, of course, where the drones are used is mostly in very segregated areas. But tomorrow, like we were explained, they will be everywhere. You like it, you don't like it, who cares?
Here comes the future and you can't run from it.
So we need to find a way to make it safe. That is what we need to find. Whether it is a toy of 20 grams that flies into your cockpit, it doesn't matter. We need to find a way to make it safe. That's what I said yesterday when I took the microphone. Today, these 20 gram, 30 gram things fly only 150 meters. Tomorrow, they will fly 10,000 meters. And that's the challenge. And there will be 10,000 of them, not just one or two. And what to do about it, I don't know. But Patrick has an answer.
That's why he's in that important position.
I was not intending to say that there is no problem below 500 feet. But below 500 feet, it can be 750, it can be 1,000 feet. I don't know. I don't. You know, we need to establish what is the limit. It's like for the weight, we need to establish the real risk. Below 500 feet, there are already a lot of unregulated aircraft which are flying. They are ultralight aircraft, for instance. I'm a private pilot myself. I know how it is to fly in uncontrolled airspace and to be safe in this type of airspace. Now, but I think it's a question of how you assess the risk. What is the density of aircraft where you operate the drones and where you operate legitimate or illegitimate aircraft? I think that when you start to be above a certain altitude, then you are clearly entering a dangerous zone because there are commercial aircraft flying around, there are lots of aircraft flying around. I was in the US 3 weeks ago, and they had incidents with drones flying at an altitude of 8,000 feet. 8,000 feet. There it is indeed extremely dangerous. I'm not saying that it's not under 500 feet, but the risk is different. Now, what we need to do, because I don't have the magic solution, but we know that there are complaints about commercial transport against David's friends for gliders and ultralight aircraft which are flying in their zones as well. We just need to find a way to make sure that we reduce appropriately the risk. I don't have the solution today. It's work that we need to perform, in particular, again, on the operational concept for flying the drones, in order to see if there is a need to put adequate tools, technologies on board which would enable to see those drones, but you don't see the ultralight aircraft at the moment. You don't see a lot of gliders at the moment. It's just a see and avoid paradigm. With drones, and that's what Ingrid was mentioning, it's no longer a see and avoid, it's a detect and avoid, but it can also be a see via detection and avoid. The remote tower system in Sweden is basically you use a camera to see instead of being physically present. So why don't we develop a way by which, in certain zones, in certain areas, there is an obligation for the drone pilot to see what is around him? I'm not saying that it is necessarily the way to go, but there is still some work to do. The problem is not technology. Remote towers, the problem was not technology. The problem was the safety case. The problem was the reliance on technology. And I think that's what we need to do with all the users of the airspace, be it the commercial air transport pilots or the glider, balloons, ultralight aircraft. We need to work together in order to make something which is safe for all the users of the airspace.
Thank you. I'm going to come back to that, but I had a gentleman over here some time ago who refused to represent the FAA. And speaking from the inside there.
Yes, John Walker, I want to comment on what Mr. Rasmussen indicated, that indeed this issue of standards organizations, as Peter indicated, ASTM has released 8 different standards for low-level UAS. Eurocade continues to do a fantastic job. The JARIS activity under Eric's leadership is coming up. Our TCA continues to do sense and avoid, command and control, transitioning to Class A airspace. Also, Mr. Rasmussen, there is an ISO new Special Committee 16 just formed. The initial meeting will be in June to establish the terms of reference. I think that's an opportunity, Patrick, maybe with conversations with yourself and Peggy Gilligan of FAA and other individuals to shape what is missing. And then, and only then, do we have the horizontal connection of those standards organizations that we are going to get what we need. So that indeed that when we have flights with the users of the airspace now and other airspace users, that it's done safely. And chart number 3 is partially correct. You're missing commercial space. Commercial space is going to be a real user. When you think about SpaceX, who is going to bring back their Grasshopper program for stages landing in non-segregated airspace, they need to be there too. Thank you.
Thank you. So where does the buck stop? I mean, there's all these groups. We need to harmonise them. We need to standardise them. In something I read, I think, Patrick, I think it was from EASA I read this, the proposal was to have some sort of observatory within the European framework. Have you got a few words on that? Where does the buck stop in all this?
I think it's what Ingrid mentioned, that the RPAS community is very different from the people that we know today. So we need to make sure, and it was mentioned by Richard as well.
Richard as well.
We need to make sure that we can reach out in the proper manner to the community. And the community of users of RPAS, but also the community of users, stakeholders which are impacted by the use of RPAS. And the debate that we are having is really showing that there is a need to have a forum to have these types of discussions.
These are the so-called legitimate airspace users.
So that's what this notion of observatory is about. Mm-hmm. You know, to have, we will have, together with the Commission, a rule-making program. We'll go through, you know, the member states and so on and so forth, the comitology. But we need to make sure that we can, you know, test our ideas with the community at large. And that's what this observatory is about.
Okay. Margus, do you think that's a good idea? Are you supportive of that?
Well, observatory, very good, of course. Commission always needs some good advice. What I was thinking and where I was getting at is that if I can ask from this forum, that can we kind of identify the drones or the RPAS or UAVs, whatever they are, as a new type of aircraft? Or is it an old type of aircraft?
Show of hands.
Or this is completely, let's say, out of the box? So do we agree that this is new type?
I've got you, Manuel.
Bring it to the legislation. I would put it in the European legislation, actually.
Okay, can we...
You say yes or no?
Are these traditional aircraft, new aircraft, something different?
Or something else.
Okay, so traditional aircraft. New aircraft. Something else.
Okay, ask these people what they are.
Okay, why are you saying something else? Identify yourself if you'd be so kind, please, as you do. I've got you, Emmanuel.
Hi, so Paul Kremin at the Department for Transport in the UK. What you're seeing with these new types of aircraft is you're seeing an explosion of applications in the way that you first saw with the computer. They can do things and will be able to do things that you know, they'll be able to go up the sides of buildings, they'll be able to do all kinds of things that aircraft can't do today, because either by size or speed or different things, they're doing it. The question I want to come back to is about, so when we created the regulatory authorities to manage these things, I didn't create, or the UK didn't create its regulatory authority to manage something of 20 grams. That is not the responsibility of the regulator to manage those types of toys. It is there to protect the other aviation users that use the same space, and clearly they will use the same space. So that the comments that we're saying, and I think the comments from there will be an interaction that takes place. But there's a point that needs to be picked up here. There is a behavioural point that has to flow from the responsibility of both the manufacturer and the user. And, you know, these are no different from any other type of, you know, you can, if you're using a system that's going down the high street, okay, and it's causing harm to third parties, is that a regulation issue or is that a social issue? My argument is that's more a social issue, not a regulation issue. If it takes someone's eye out because it's flying down the street, the first person they're going to call is the police. It's not the Civil Aviation Authority. Do the people, when they buy these things from the radio stores and the map planes, do they understand that they're buying an aircraft? Of course they don't. It is something completely different. And we have to treat it differently. And I think the approach that EASA is taking is the right approach, in the sense there are other authorities that can take the responsibility for, and there is a responsibility on the manufacturers to make sure that their toys are sufficiently restricted not to go in areas, whether you use it kite marks or whatever you want to use, standards. There is an education that the role that government, the EC has to play to make sure that people understand their responsibilities as adults, as human beings, to other people in keeping them safe. As you progress up the technology scale, they increasingly become like aircraft. And it's quite rightly that they should be regulated as aircraft. And therefore, as you reach altitudes that make them challenging to aircraft, then they have to be regulated as aircraft. But the things that operating at 200 feet around the aircraft, absolutely not. I think the approach is you get the right standards, you get the right restrictions, you get the right authorities that could deal with it, other things, but I don't necessarily believe that's aviation.
Okay, thank you, that was very helpful. Let me ask you, before you hand the mic back, let me ask you another question. To grossly oversimplify what you said, and I apologise in advance for that, you're effectively saying the correct basis for regulation isn't weight, it isn't function, it's altitude.
No, it's not the weight at all. It's what altitude. You're doing with it, and how you assess the risk is about how you apply the technology that you're doing. And what I'm saying is the people that are operating at a much lower level, 200 feet, 300 feet, they're in a completely different environment. I accept there is things occasionally that are flying around that environment. They're not likely to be in urban areas because you can't fly other aviation areas in built-up areas around 300 feet. So the chance of hitting another aviation object is different, but you may actually hit something else, a building or a person. But is that an aviation issue? If I drive my car and I hit a lamppost, who do I go to? Well, the police probably will prosecute me or the local council will prosecute me because I've hit their lamppost. They'll want me to pay for the damage, and maybe I'll get arrested for reckless driving or something. Why should it be different for things that are operating in that environment?
Thank you. Emmanuel at the back there, please. He's been very patient. Stop playing with a button.
1, 2. Oh, yes, working. All right. Well, I'm very interested to listen to what all you said, but of course technology is part of the solution. It's not saying it's not a problem. It's part of the solution. Is technology brought us here. The progress of technology is why we are here now. So, and there's a dynamic. We have to remember that. There's a dynamic, and this dynamic is very fast. All those jobs that are done by full-size aircraft at low level will probably, 2/3 of it will be done by unmanned system pretty soon, because it's high risk to fly low. And then when you have a police helicopter consuming 100 liters of kerosene per hour, and a little helicopter that consumes just a few watts to do the same job, guess we will win? The little one. It's safer, it's less pollution, less noise, it's gonna win. So all low level will probably be done by small ones, except when you have to transport people for going to hospital, for example. Then you need to work out on that one, and that's a tough one. I mean, you have a model, the car industry. You can design today a bicycle with an electric motor that could go 100 kilometers per hour. Limits have been already set to, what, 30 kilometers per hour when you have an electric bike? You are limited by an embedded system on board that will limit your speed. So I really believe for the toys industry, embedded limitation is the only way. So embedded, and the technology is the solution. Really close contact between you and providers, and listening to users. Users are those that desire more always, but you have to, of course, limit that and make sure crazy people will be identified. So I totally agree on that.
We normally just aggregate all the crazy people, put them in Brussels. It's really simple. It's a really easy way to do it. Yeah.
Oh, that embedded way to track the system and the users is a key element.
Thank you. Thank you. So some of the technology for the SJU to develop is actually impeding technology that stops things from happening. Is that sort of where we're going? We could talk about the technology forever, but I'd actually like to swing the conversation back now more to the enforcement area, because we need to talk about that as well. And you, sir, mentioned it as well. Has anyone warned the police that we're going to be relying on them to do all this stuff that traditionally the aviation has self-enforced? I mean, I was fascinated, Ingrid, that you said that the Swedish CAA spends its day watching YouTube.
Yes.
And gets away with it.
It's quite efficient as well.
Yeah, well, it saves you when you get home from watching YouTube. You know.
No, but I think we have to have another mindset as enforcement authorities. We have to use all the new technologies and all the new media to reach out to the people that uses these devices or new devices in the future. So yes, we use all the tools that we have to our disposal, of course. But we are in close contact with the police authorities, because we have to make them aware that this is something that they have to keep a close eye on. Look at the concept of the lasers, that we had quite many incidents in Sweden for many years, and it was quite worrying, not only for us, but also for the public and the passengers as well. We had a close cooperation with the police authorities on this quite intensively, and now we see results of that. So we have to involve all the authorities that will be involved in these issues. Also the Data Protection Authority as well, because it has to do with privacy integrity issues. So we need to work proactively with many authorities on this.
Richard, has anyone warned the gendarme in France?
First, my guess is that the police in the future will not be able to cope with enforcement if it is designed as the only way to answer to this problem. And for that reason, I also believe that embedded devices must be part of the solutions. We have in France a dedicated police force, which name is Gendarmerie des Transports Aériens, which is located inside the CAA offices and work in very strong relations with the DGAC. And they are spending a lot of time to find who are the people who have flown these drones over Paris. What is interesting to note is that there are a lot of eyewitnesses, even eyewitnesses coming from policemen. And they are not always, not all of them are reliable.
You can't trust the police. Shock.
No, but it's not obvious to detect an RPAS by night. And besides, you have this kind of phenomena. Then when there is an issue rising, and many people see the problem everywhere. So nowadays we have this problem. So I do not think that on a nominal basis, if recreational use of drones grows a lot, police have the tools to enforce the rules if they are not other tools.
Right. Margus?
Thank you very much. I was listening all of this debate, and I got an idea, actually. I'll read you the European Data Protection Supervisor's opinion on drones from, let me see, from...
late last year.
Yeah, last year. Okay. The point 22 is saying that data protection law establishes a number of requirements, but then the point 28 says that in the EU, unlike other jurisdictions, the location in a public or private space is not a relevant criterion when determining whether the right to privacy and the right of data protection apply or not? So how do this very dry and very boring text talk to me? What I see is that we were talking about sense and the void. But I got an idea around this forum is that where I'm doing my kite surfing, like tomorrow afternoon, what I need is I need a jammer to jam all this stuff. So what I need is my private space. So what we were talking about yesterday was that say that we make restricted areas, but they were actually morph, not moving. When I'm surfing with my kite surf and I have 25 meters of wire that can be cut by any small drone, I want to get back to the shore, 2 kilometers, 3 kilometers, 5 kilometers. I need a jammer. So I need my private space in that. So that's what I got. Thank you.
Any telecom regulators in the room, just out of interest? Jamming not generally popular with our telecom regulators. Gentleman over there. Thank you.
Now we are on the point where it gets dangerous, because if you are jamming something, you are not sure what you are jamming, only your private space or other tools or other machines, and
that was just an idea.
Well, maybe we.
But to protect against piloted aircrafts, RPAS, there are two dangers. Jamming is one danger, and you don't know what the other machines are reacting. That's a real danger. This operation on open heart. And this second one is someone is with his shotgun and shot to the RPASs because he don't want to be stalked or something like this. That's also not a solution. That's your own justice. You down the RPASs. So that's not a solution. So we have to find and discuss with our interior ministers and the police what is the technology that they can enforce the laws. If we have a regulation or laws, they have to be enforced easily. So that's my suggestion to how we could protect against drones. But that's always a wet blanket in the discussion, because we discuss about the opportunities, not about the risk. But since 2 days we are only discussing about the risks.
I thought we spoke a little bit about opportunities yesterday.
There are business cases. We are talking about leisure drones, and the answer was better no regulation, and we don't. We discuss about the world market, and we discuss about European regulation. Is Europe the world? And
historically, gentlemen here.
We don't talk about ICAO regulation.
Yeah. I was going to get to ICAO, as a matter of fact, my favourite subject. Sir.
Hi, Gary Clayton from UAVS in the UK. Just picking up on Margus's point here, because I think that was thrown out, just he was fishing. So we've talked a lot about, I hear a lot about sense and avoid and regulation, etc. But there's one area that so far hasn't been mentioned both yesterday and today, and that's the work that's going on at the World Radio Conference for a standardised protected frequency for RPAS use worldwide for command and control. And nearly everything that we saw out there yesterday is in the open frequency zones, so therefore there's always the opportunity of collision with other systems.
Can you just keep the mic in your mouth? Yes.
Other systems in the same frequency band. I think picking up on Paul's point, between your tools and your toys, you probably find your toys will be in the open frequency band, but professional tools will move up into the World Radio Conference allocated frequencies, and therefore you're in a different class of aircraft, and then you're in a different type of regulation as well. So that's probably where you will see the demarcation between what is a police issue and what's an aviation issue, in how you regulate them, in whether they've moved into the the World Radio Conference allocated frequencies. That issue is also being discussed by the ICAO panel, and there's work going on across the world on how that frequency now allocated will be used. And there's also, this year's World Radio Conference is also discussing satellite allocations for safe navigation as well. So there's probably a demarcation there between the toys and the tools.
Interesting, very interesting. Did you have a comment? Yes, Austria, please. Gentleman at the end of the row, and then gentleman at the back. Who was it at the back? Yeah. So, no, sorry, Austria first, and then, yeah.
So, thank you, Franz Nischl, Ministry of Transport, Austria. I followed the discussion very carefully since we also in the authority have the challenge on how to enforce laws which we have on a national basis. And Ingrid mentioned, of course, one way you can do to watch YouTube, which I also did, by the way, and to find out there's operators obviously in the field endangering seriously airspace users and also people on the ground and so on. The question for us is, you can take this, in my opinion, as an example and pick one out or the other. This is very difficult to be used as a tool for enforcement. I would go further, and I have listened to the last presentation from yesterday from this gentleman from the industry who brought first up and confirmed, which we have discussed internally, and it was the name of geofencing. So electronic wall and so on, and also Patrick Key and Margus have mentioned it already. I think that's one important idea for me which is in the air. It seems that industry is ready for it, since it was mentioned yesterday, is willing to implement it, and it would give also CAAs an important tool, at least to sort out the unintentional society, which is the toy player, the actor, which didn't read the law, this 100,000 of pages of aviation.
No, 10 Commandments, just 10 Commandments.
Yeah, and it's and sort out this one. That would be a good tool. And coming back to the idea of Margus, who said when he's going kite surfing and just joking about the jammer, that's seriously something we also have to consider. How do we give the police the tools that they can identify someone who is operating an RPAS system? They can't go around and drive in their cars. They might need in future receivers, because all those RPAS systems are permanently transmitting. And Cesar might do research on that. That should be also a tool for the CAAs to get signals where's operation, where's critical operation in what area, and how can we be very particular about enforcement of the laws. Thank you.
Thank you. Last comment from the gentleman at the back there. Thank you, sir.
Yes, hi, I'm Lucas van Oostrom from Aerotronics. We're a manufacturer of small UAVs. I like the approach that manufacturers actually, you know, that technology will in fact take care of a lot of the problems. What I do see, however, is, and if you look at drones, are they other aircraft? No, they're just another means of controlling an aircraft. That's the difference, because the big planes will, in the end, the big cargo planes will fly automated, and all the other aircraft in the skies, in the end, will also fly in an automated way. With the technology, and when I hear the comments about radio frequencies, I think that there's a disconnect with the industry that's providing 99% of the drones, and 99% of the drones that are flying are the smaller types of systems. They don't need a frequency, the 5.0 gigahertz or something for RPAS, but they will probably use something like LTE, 4G networks. That's a much more logical step. We see drones more as our mobile phones, but then flying mobile phones. And we will use technology that's already there, networks that are already there. We will not use frequencies like a special RPAS frequency. And that's where the disconnect is, because I think there's a lot of traditional aviation people who are now making up all these committees and thinking about the problem, but they're not listening enough. And the good thing is that I hear that everybody here from the EU is thinking about it, and EASA. But a lot of people in these committees, they haven't got a clue what the industry is actually doing.
Well, thank you very much. I thought that's a very interesting comment. Time being what it is, I think, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to invite you now to the first meeting of the EU RPAS Observatory, which will take place in the coffee room with the coffee, because I can't believe that this conversation is going to stop at this moment. But we are going to change focus when we come back. Please be back at 11:30 and observatory away over there. Thanks very much.